My name is Will Hodgkinson. I'm the chief rock and pop critic of the Times. I've done a few books, and I've been an Oasis fan one way or another for quite a long time.
From the beginning?
Pretty much. I'll tell you what happened. I must have been at university, and I was in a nightclub, and they were playing all kinds of stuff, mostly old songs, classic stuff and everything. And suddenly Supersonic came on by Oasis. Now, I didn't know who it was, and it sounded like every classic rock song of all time, and totally derivative, and yet there was something about it which made it completely fresh. It was the most basic 3-chord anthem you've ever heard, but it was so exciting. And it's like, what is this? This is so good. Found out that it was Oasis, and within a month or two, they went from being a band that people talked about to a band that were huge. And I was used to indie bands. Indie bands never got beyond a certain point. Nirvana had happened, and so Nirvana was very unusual because that was grunge, punk rock and everything. You never had a band like that get big. Before then it'd be people like Mudhoney and all these small bands. But you're used to going to ULU, the University of London Union, you'd go and see My Bloody Valentine or whoever it was, and that was the peak. And suddenly Oasis came along, and it was so completely different because the music was, like I said, so familiar. They didn't look like indie kids. They looked like they came straight from council estate in Burnage, which is basically what they did. Very, dressed very normally. And there was just something very obviously special from day one. But it was hard to say what it was because it wasn't like the new Bowie had arrived. It wasn't like the world's greatest singer or the world's greatest guitarist or anything like that, or even the world's greatest songwriter. It was the pure excitement of these very normal people doing something which you could imagine yourself doing, even though you couldn't. And suddenly they were everywhere. And then when the first album came out, Definitely Maybe, I remember listening to it with my girlfriend, and had a great cover with the Bacharach reference and all this stuff, and just listening to it again and again and again and again, and thinking these songs are just superb. They're not doing anything that people haven't done before, but there's something so special about them, especially Live Forever, which I just thought was magical.
And I imagine this kind of reminiscence is something that has happened times hundreds and hundreds of thousands over the past few weeks while I've been doing this UK leg of this tour. People just seem so overtaken with a kind of sweet nostalgia. In terms of the actual tour itself, though, I mean, how successful would you say it has been on the whole, this UK leg?
It's been successful beyond anybody's dreams, including Ignition Management, including the label, including Oasis. It's been incredibly successful. I think something like 20% of the British population have applied for tickets. Was it 14 million people? It's just unbelievable. But the thing that really struck me, okay, first of all, they did a set list which you'd expect. You heard all the classics ending with Champagne Supernova.
Lovely.
All the Wonderwall, everything you'd want to hear. And, these are stadiums, they're sold out. It's been phenomenally successful.
A lot of merch.
I'd say the original Oasis T-shirts from the 90s, if you can get one of them, it's better. But anyway, that's just personal fashion sense. Endless merch. Endless money-making opportunities.
Quite.
But it was very joyous. That was the thing. That's why, I don't really follow football, but I could only compare it to a big World Cup game. It felt like that. Because it was people from all backgrounds and all ages, and you wouldn't think that with Oasis. They've definitely got a certain image, a kind of laddish image. It wasn't like that. It was really, very, very much kind of like, everyday Britain. People from just British life, and also especially at Cardiff, where the super fans have come from all over the world. It's just global life. But it was absolutely superb.
As you said, there's been a question for a while of will they, won't they actually get back together and do some shows again. You spoke to Alan McGee,
yes,
who discovered them way back when,
yes,
in Glasgow.
That's right, at King Tut's.
And he was of the opinion it's not happening.
This is really hard for me to know whether he was stringing me along or whether he really, because this was, I don't know, probably a year before it happened, and I was interviewing one of his bands, a band called the Brian Jonestown Massacre, and we were hanging out because we were in Germany. And I said, and I interviewed
You have such a good job, Will.
Well, sometimes.
We're hanging out in Germany with this band.
Yeah. You Brian Jonestown Massacre. But anyway, so here and there, it's very nice. I said, well, it's going to happen. And he said, no, it's not. I said, why not? He said, because Noel doesn't need it. He makes $1 million from Wonderwall alone, because it's just the royalties are just off the scale, because that song is played somewhere a lot at all times. And I thought, I think there's an itch that needs to be scratched there. So I don't know, because, he manages Cast, and Cast was supporting Oasis. But my feeling is that it was genuine, he didn't know. And my feeling, and I don't have any special intel on this, I should add, but my feeling is that the whole thing, after years of management trying to make it happen, hoping that when it did come together, it happened very quickly.
And were you surprised by that or not?
Yeah, kind of. Okay, so I tell you what happened. I did an interview with Noel Gallagher, probably maybe a year or so ago. I'm not sure. No, be a couple of years ago now. And obviously I was asking him the inevitable question. And before, I've interviewed Noel a bunch of times, and before he's just been like, everyone asks me, I don't want to do it again. I am doing my own stuff. I'm getting away from it. I haven't spoken. And they really hadn't spoken. That really is true. They hadn't spoken at all. So, he just didn't want to go back there, I don't think. And suddenly the tone changed. And he was saying, if we get back together, it's got to be good, and it's got to be the best it's ever been. And that's why Liam won't do it, because he'll have to face me, he'll have to go in rehearsals, and I'll say to him, all right, dickhead, how's it going? And that's when, to use his phrase, the arse will fall out of his pants.
Such a way with words.
Such a way with words. But what I then realised is, he's not stupid. He's talking to a journalist who's writing a cover story for the Times. He knows that Liam's going to read this. He was putting it out there. And he kept saying he ain't called and he's not going to call. That was his message. He said. And then, 6 months later, I did an interview with Liam. And Liam started saying, well, that's ridiculous that he expects me to call. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. And then he said, you know what? I'd love to get Oasis back together. And if Noel just thinks for a moment, you know what? I've been really horrible to my little brother, so I'm going to send him a box of chocolates and some flowers and say sorry. I was like, well, I don't think that's going to happen. But it was really interesting because, again, it's talking through the press, which is what they've always done, actually.
So dysfunctional.
Yeah, but very good at interviews, which a lot of people aren't, and they enjoy interviews.
But they always seem quite prickly, but no, they're quite good fun.
Liam can be prickly. Noel's good fun.
In what way?
Noel is very sharp, very funny. He likes an audience for his bonmots. You know what I mean? I'm sure if you get him in the wrong mood, or whatever, but I get on well with him. Liam can be more mercurial. So he can be incredibly charming and incredibly funny when he's in the right mood. And, sometimes I've done interviews in the past where he hasn't been in the right mood and it's been really hard.
Go on.
Well, it bears a lot in what's happening with their career at the time. So the first time I interviewed Liam, I never interviewed him during the original Oasis days. Oasis had split up and he had formed a band, you might remember, called BDI. And BDI wasn't really happening. For some reason, even though it's basically the same sort of stuff, people weren't going for it. And I did this interview with him, and he had a song called Don't Brother Me. And it's basically it wasn't a very good song, but it was basically a moan, a complaint about his brother. And I said, well, this is obviously about Noel. And he's going, well, you don't know that. So, well, it's kind of obvious. And he started saying, yeah, well, it takes more than blood to be my brother, mate. In other words, we're not brothers anymore, And so he was really prickly and I think hurt. I think that was the reality, is that a lot of this fraternal bashing is kind of like, it's just two brothers who have had a terrible fight, but the younger one does want to be friends with his older brother, who he's always looked up to, whatever he says. He's one of the greatest songwriters in Britain. Of course he looks up to him. And he's given him the songs that have made Liam famous. And now he's not giving them anymore. He's saying you can't have any more. So there he is trying to do BDI and no one cares. And then soon after that, BDI with a secret gig at Glastonbury. Now that should have been a big deal, but it's at 11 in the morning on one of the stages. I can't remember which one. But halfway through, it was almost empty. Like nobody. This is the thing. Everyone thinks that Oasis have just always been a thing that everyone wants to go to, but it does have peaks and troughs. And then the next time I spoke to Liam, he was very funny. He was going, "Yeah, I'm thinking of just doing the Sexy Beast thing." And what he meant was he just wanted to go and retire to Spain and just get fat, just sit there and drink beer by the pool.
Which I'm sure he's probably got the money for.
Yeah.
You mentioned there how it's not always been the case that 40 million people want to get tickets for
definitely.
them. Of course, they were a huge smash hit in their day. When did it start to wane? And was that because their relationship was taking a turn?
I think actually it was before the relationship was taking a turn. I mean, they've always had fights, obviously. But if you look at the pattern, you have definitely maybe the perfect album, absolutely brilliant, and with like a real edge. Then you have What's the Story, which is the big one for the world. So it's not just fans of music now, it's global, it's a phenomenon. That's when it goes out to the mums and dads and the grannies and the kids.
I've heard it and I'm a basic.
There you go.
Yeah,
I would not say that, but anyway. So then, absolutely massive, bigger than anyone could have ever imagined, and also unprecedented, because there's never been an indie band, which is what they were at that point. They're still on Creation Records. There's never been an indie band of that scale. No one's ready for it. No one's prepared for it. Suddenly they've got, it's the kind of footballer's world. It's the world way beyond music. So then they do Be Here Now, when they're all taking quite a lot of cocaine. And initially, because they're the biggest band in the world, everyone says it's great, until they listen to it a few times and realise it's not that great. It's just not as good. So from then on, the rest of the albums were, there's one called Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. I can't believe somebody must have pointed out that you can't stand on the shoulder of giants. That's just not possible. It's got to be the shoulder of a giant or shoulders of giants. Nobody bothered pointing it out. I was the biggest band in the world. So you could see things like that are a sign to me that things are going wrong.
The wheels are coming off.
No one dares say, it's completely illiterate. So there were always good songs. There's a great song called The Importance of Being Idle. The final Oasis song is called Falling Down. It's brilliant. It's like this kind of weird psychedelic epic. But I would say they had that incredible period and it was so fast. No one could have dealt with that. I mean, Liam Gallagher went from being in his mum's council house in Burnage to Patsy Kensett's house in Primrose Hill. And by the age of 21, he was a millionaire several times over. Now, you think that, a couple of years previously to that, he was digging holes in the road, and this happens. It's a lot to cope with. It's a hell of a lot to cope with. It didn't happen slowly. So you can see why the wheels would fall off.
But falling off not just in a way, but not just relating to the songwriting, but also to just their performance. People talk about Liam's voice just going to rubbish. I think after there's a kind of golden period where all the rock and roll behaviour, which is definitely part of the appeal because most of us don't live that life. So this idea of these two very normal guys who suddenly are just in this world of, Patsy Kensett's house.
And everything that goes with it, and just, causing fights everywhere. And, there's the brilliant story that Alan McGee tells, the first ever tour. And I think they're going to Belgium or Holland. Oh, no, it's Holland, I think it was. And so, big deal. Everything's happening. And they get into a fight on the ferry. They all drink far too much, take too much cocaine and all the rest of it. Liam gets chased around like Keystone Cops. The cops are chasing him around the ferry, around the casino. He's turning things upside down. And, of course, they're all arrested when they arrive. The concert doesn't happen. And Noel Gallagher phones up, who wasn't involved in the fight, he phones up Alan McGee, his record label boss, with this terrible news, saying, it's all gone wrong, it's all fallen apart. And Alan McGee goes, brilliant. Because he knows the value of something like that. It's the Sex Pistols all over again. You know, it's like this is going to be myth-making. You know, so there's that golden period when they're sort of the bad behaviour. Liam's voice is amazing. The attitude was there. It's just absolutely perfect. But no one can maintain that. And as you get older, it changes. Certainly by the late period, and they were kind of running through the motions. I did see them in that period, and I don't think Liam even wanted to be there the time I saw it. I think it was at Wembley. And it's just a bit bleak, you know, it wasn't there. So the excitement, which cannot be manufactured, of this Oasis reunion, which has just been so joyful, and kind of reminded everyone of what a band can do, because pop has dominated for years.
Yeah.
It's just been remarkable to see.
The UK leg has just finished. You were just talking about the tail end of their last iteration on tour and how it could be a bit bleak, to use your word. On that first night in Cardiff of this reunion, when you went, was it immediately clear that this was not that? They were back on form, they wanted to be there and were loving it? It
was remarkable. I tell you what happened. They came on stage, and everyone knows the story of Liam and Noel. Everyone knows all their battles. And they did, I wouldn't call it a hug, I'd call it a kind of accidentally bumping into each other almost. You know, I don't think it lasted a second. I think it was less than that. But it was so significant. You know, they came on stage and they just kind of did this little, whatever you call it, sort of bump. And then they started playing. And you knew that they knew within halfway through Hello, which then went into Acquiesce, which is, of course, about we need each other, the two brothers coming back together. They knew that it was brilliant. Mm. And it was. The thing is that it's only, like I said, you know, it's only a bunch of blokes playing guitar and bass and singing and occasionally a bit of horns and stuff. You know, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But it was just so well done. And
a lot of blokes on stage with instruments, and the two of them, apart from that, barely interacting, is that right? I mean, it's not like they have like some great dialogue on stage.
I'd say zero dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and then Liam says something. I don't think Noel must have said something. I don't remember him saying anything, because Noel's got his own section in the middle. And the interesting thing is that Noel's songs are very thoughtful. So there's Little by Little and a song called Talk Tonight. Now, Talk Tonight was when the wheels went off early on. They were touring LA, and they did this famous concert at the House of Blues, which was an absolute disaster, because they'd all been taking... Actually, the Brian Jones Tabasco had given them what they thought was cocaine and turned out to be crystal meth.
Ouch.
Yeah, and it was absolutely disastrous. They all went on stage. They were all playing songs, just not the same one.
All the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order.
So it was an absolute disaster. The band almost fell apart. Noel went off to San Francisco. He met a girl, I think probably more like, it sounds like from the song, it sounds like it's more like a kind of companionship. You know, she talked him off the ledge kind of thing. You know, he was just totally depressed and, you know, Talk Tonight, How You Saved My Life. And it's a beautiful song. And that came in the middle. And Noel's got a very good voice. This is something that people forget. You know, Liam's got the attitude voice, which carries it away. You know, it's John Lennon meets Johnny Lydon, isn't it? It's just, you know, it's got that attitude.
Good way of putting it.
It's, you know, it's fantastic. But Noel's singing is very, very thoughtful. And, you know, the midsection was just beautiful. There's no question that they knew it was good. They must have rehearsed a lot, because it was really, really tight. So Liam is standing there. Bonehead is in between the two of them. So Bonehead, of course, is an original band member as well, going all the way back to when they're called The Rain, even before Noel joined. And then you've got Noel on the other side, and then Gem Archer and Andy Bell on the other. So Gem Archer's on guitar and Andy Bell's on bass. And Joey Waronker, I think his name, is the drummer. And it was just... Yeah, it was just fantastic.
And did it feel like a new thing, or did it feel like an enjoyable throwback?
You know what? It felt new in a sense, because it was... When something's really exciting, it does feel new. I mean, I then went to see them for fun at Wembley with my daughter. And, you know, so that's another generation, someone just out of her teens. And she absolutely loved it, and she knew all the songs. So that's interesting.
I know
That's
several people wwho went to the tour who weren't alive when the band was back together, last together.
It's quite remarkable.
There have been some bum notes with this tour, haven't there? There's the really unfortunate incident of that chap who died during one of the shows. Also, this enormous complaint about dynamic pricing and maybe them cashing in a bit too much as well.
Yeah, so I've got a theory about dynamic pricing, and by the way, I do not, when I'm saying all this, I do not have insider information because they have been very, very, very tight. They haven't done any interviews. And that's been very deliberate because if one of them says the wrong thing, they have an argument,
exactly.
the whole thing can fall apart. So as much as I get on well with both of them and, I'm big supporter, but it hasn't happened. So I'm saying this as a theory, not as inside information. They're coming together. They haven't spoken to each other since 2009. There's so much riding on it. It's so difficult to make that happen. To get the for the arrangements for what's going to be the deal between the two of them. How's it going to work? Who's got the final say? All this kind of stuff. That's a very, very difficult negotiation for Marcus Russell, the manager, and everyone else involved. I do not think for a moment that they're going to say, that Marcus Russell or anyone was going to say, so we've got this new policy that Ticketmaster have got. It's called dynamic pricing. It works like hotels and airplanes. I just don't think they would have, they wouldn't have...
They had enough on their plate.
They had enough on their plate. I just cannot believe that they would have been consulted. So, but also what I do think happened, and I'm pretty sure this is, this isn't conjecture. I'm pretty sure this is exactly what happened. Everyone was taken by surprise, really, because like I said, by the end of the Oasis tours, they could still fill stadiums, but it wasn't the thing. Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, fine. Liam had kind of taken his solo career as far as it could go, and then they think, okay, Oasis, let's do it.
You wouldn't immediately have put them in the same bracket as Taylor Swift, which these shows have sort of been approaching.
Bigger. Bigger. I would say bigger, in terms of demand.
Yeah.
Not in terms of gross in the end, because that's still, because it's too early, but I'd say bigger in terms of demand. And I think that took everyone by surprise. I really do.
Those sort of bum notes aside, it has been very successful. They seem to be still getting on, or at least they're not falling out still. They've loads more shows around the world in this tour to do. There's a suggestion they might do Nebworth House again, which was a sort of...
Kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Which was a big, famous... Was that sort of 96?
Yeah, that was the one where...
So they might return and do another set of nights there.
It makes sense. Yeah, it would make sense. And so I think I could see that, there'll be 30th anniversaries and that kind of thing. So...
of course, yes, because it would have been 30 years, 96, 2006.
So you could see that happening.
Do you think they're setting themselves up to, do the full Rolling Stones or Guns N' Roses and actually just keep going, keep the cash rolling?
Yeah, I don't think they'll do a new album.
No.
I think, I could be wrong, but I think what is more likely is that Noel will want to go away and write material on his own, do it as High Flying Birds or do it as whatever. I may be wrong.
But because you think it would be sort of too emotionally taxing to do an album together. Doing shows is one thing, but an album would be a stretch.
I think there's also the expectation of the Oasis album. And the returning Oasis album has got to be better than the last Oasis albums. It's got to go back to... it can't go back to Definitely Maybe, because those songs came from someone who was, desperate to get out of his situation and was just channeling something which he wasn't thinking about. It was just so pure. So you can't do that, and I don't think any songwriter can do that from that kind of golden period when you're just completely unself-conscious. But it would have to be very, very good, and I think it would be difficult to be on that level. I may well be wrong. It may be, because my feeling with, like, when Oasis got back together, everyone would say, oh yeah, it's because he's got divorced. It's like he's got enough money to pay for a divorce. It was because it was the unfinished business. It finished badly with Oasis. It finished famously with Liam throwing a plum at his brother's head.
Yes.
And then, slightly more dangerously, a guitar. And, that's no way to end the band. So I'm sure that everyone was very, very happy when they finally managed to get it together